Thank you very much, and good morning. Yes, it's still just morning here, I'm on from NSOE. For those who are not aware of that, that's the Trans-Europe organization that coordinates activity for 41 TSOs across Europe, and I'm going to talk this morning on the topic of rule book for Europe in markets, in system operation, and indeed in connection requirements. All of those are covered by codes. I am particularly looking at high penetration of renewable issues. So my content is, why does Europe need network codes? Is my starting point. What are the benefits of European network codes? What is the value created by European network codes? And here I'm looking at the broader scenes across the market and system operation, as well as the connection codes. But having listened to other parts of the conference, I think some more detail on the connection codes are appropriate, so I will try to squeeze that in within the 17 minutes before I give the concluding remarks. I have some more material which I will just leave for you to read if you have a specific interest in these. So starting out, why does Europe need network codes? Well, partially that's because you want to go by 2030 into 50-60% of renewable generation sources. That gives a number of challenges, which you can see on the right: managing variability, enabling large cross-border flows over very long distances across Europe, ideally also able to deal in a system operation context with much higher complexity, and connect thousands of small units, as we know before, and empower consumers. All of this leads to network codes being key enabler to cope with these challenges and seize new opportunities. So, looking a little bit more depth into this, we have the RES, the renewable energy variability, with distribution generation, and the need for cross-border trade. All of these leads to network codes being important as enablers. There has been network codes, and there are still in Europe in individual countries, but we're moving to a single cross-Europe covering 34 countries, which is 28 inside EU and 6 additional countries who are not member of Electricity Union, but still physically connected within the 5 synchronous areas. So from the bottom on the right, we have connection codes, requirements for generators, demand connection codes, and HVDC connection codes, which I have been working with since the inception in 2009, and we are now coming through to completion of that work. The operations code for system operations guideline and emergency and restoration of how to cope with difficult situations. And finally, the overall aim for the single European electricity market is the market codes where we have CACM, capacity allocation and congestion management, forward capacity allocation, and electricity balancing. So let's look at progress on these. There have been many stages in this 8-year progress, and indeed it was even before that, in 2007, 2008, that the European Commission enabled the activity to take place, and for the activity to be shared between the European Commission itself, between the regulators in Europe, which were also established a pan-European regulator, and then NSOE as the holding the pen for all of these codes, and a mass of meetings, thousands meetings, in terms of interactions with stakeholders to get support for where we're going. The end result is that we are now moving into the implementation phase, and indeed we are a little bit further ahead than what we have here, because further publications of final approved codes have taken place. So, what are the benefits of European network codes? We have sustainability, competitiveness, and social welfare and security of supply as the 3 foundation stones. Provide clearer rules for connection is part of sustainability, and also facilitate the integration of renewables and increase the level of maximum admissible renewable energy penetration. Personally, for me, going to 100% with operating a synchronous area without a synchronous generator is my personal hobby as well as a topic that I'm dealing with. I will leave you to consider the other elements in context of time. So sustainability, yes, we have 260 gigawatts already on the network of renewable energy, and we're planning to have 350 gigawatt more by 2030, which is the fit-for-purpose point for the connection codes, although the system operation and the markets are a bit more short-term in their setup. We have about 25 gigawatts connected in 2016, and we expect that to continue at about that rate. In terms of security of supply, in 2006 we had a major disturbance, but in the last 10 years we haven't had any cross-country major disturbances. And we have established coordinating, system operation coordinating regions across all of Europe. We have, in terms of competitive and social welfare, we have now already Dayahead markets coming on stream, and we have a tremendous amount of data shared, millions of files being made in a very transparent manner to make the market operate in a very efficient manner. So, examples of what the value is of the network code. If we start with the market coupling, capacity allocation and congestion management, integration of the wholesale market is well underway. And we have a number of initiatives in progress here, and flow-based market coupling is a major contributor to that, and you see here the block in dark of flow-based market coupling that is already up and running. Other forms of market-based coupling are in place and are gradually being introduced. And we see at the bottom of the left-hand side that 1,500 terawatt hours were already traded in Dayahead in the power exchanges in 2016. So trading is a big issue and is being supported with a rule book fit for the early and maybe not yet for the very longer terms and may need updating as we go. We have further in the balancing market also established an international balancing market which is coming along. I wouldn't say it's mature yet, but it's getting there, and it's delivering some values already in three areas defined here. The overall aim is that it will deliver benefits of about 500 to 800 million euros per year in terms of being able to share balancing power across borders. Conservative transmission system operators are a little bit reticent in going too far here, and I'm an impatient person in this context. I want to see also a lot of sharing between synchronous areas across the seas. So if you look at case study 3 here, regional coordination, we now have regional coordinators covering the whole of Europe, and they are in various degrees of advancement in terms of different tasks that they're taking on. The major services are getting well underway, particularly in Corizo on TSC Net, have been operating for some time, as has the Nordic system. But there are still a very substantial agenda to be undertaken in order to deliver the system operation guidelines fully by 2019. So this is work in progress, getting there. Going to then see what are they dealing with already. Well, here we have a solar eclipse in 2015, which gave 14 gigawatts of loss of input in a number of countries, Germany, France, Greece, Spain, and as we see here, and France. And this was coped with without a major hiccup. When we come forward to 2027, there is another big eclipse expected, and we then expect to see as fast as 14 gigawatt, sorry, we had 14 gigawatt per hour Now we are expecting 32 gigawatt per hour ramping associated with the next big solar eclipse. So getting ready to deal with these in a renewable-dominated world is an important issue. And, of course, many other types of challenges. Another case study we're showing here is linking to problems that we have experienced in the past. In 2006, we had a continental Europe, the largest by far synchronous area, splitting 3 ways, and we did lose a lot of demand with a successful operation of low-frequency demand disconnection in the orange area here, which was the low frequency that went 49.0. When you look forward to the future with a much higher penetration than we had in 2006 of renewable energy, would we then be able to withstand a similar challenge? The answer is yes, if we do implement the codes adequately. They are there in place to deliver similar services from renewable as we had in the past from the synchronous generators and from other elements on the system. But it is a challenging situation. More technical issues I want to deal with in the last few minutes here. We have 2 stages of implementing 8 codes. First, we had the European level, which has been concluded. But we have a national implementation for the connection network codes between 2016 and 2018. About 60% of parameters are determined at the European level, but 40% delegated to national level, as we call non-exhaustive parameters. And these are being sorted out in 2017 and 2018, where the power lies with each nation to determine them. For some issues, like frequency-related issues, coordination is required between countries within each of the 5 synchronous areas, making sense in order to share the burden equitably. Here are some of the topics that are under development at present. I'm not saying that they are concluded, because they aren't. They will be concluded by May next year. And the first issue we have is megawatt boundary for getting additional requirements. So we have higher requirements in Type D, which is generation connected above 110 kV or very large, compared to A, which is typically below 1 megawatt, or in some areas below 100 kilowatt size generators. We are determining the boundaries, but again, that level is being refined. Frequency parameters, I will briefly touch on frequency-sensitive mode, limited frequency-sensitive mode for emergency state, and synthetic inertia and demand response. But I need to speed up here because I haven't got many minutes left. So talking first about frequency-sensitive mode, we have seen this curve before, and within a synchronous area of the parameters associated with this, like droop, needs to be fairly shared. The burden needs to be fairly shared, and therefore you need the coordination that I talked about within each synchronous area, and that is a challenging task, particularly for continental Europe. We see here the delay in terms of starting, which should be less than 2 seconds for synchronous plant, and even shorter value for renewable energy. And again, coordination is in progress for determining the parameters. Some range of values have been handed over from European level to national level. Indeed, for limited frequency sensitive mode, for very high frequency, we heard at one stage about the 50.2 problem in Germany and elsewhere. Well, that is now being tackled in what we call limited frequency sensitive mode over frequency, and again, parameters need to be tackled. When you go very close to 100%, then you have issue of inertia, and there has been some sessions touching on topic of inertia here. But there is a big difference in the 100 to 1 difference between Ireland as the smallest synchronous area and continental Europe as the largest. The urgency is greater in Ireland and indeed in Great Britain, which both will see times when the total RES will exceed 100%. We have in GB, I've done the analysis and showing 2030, we expect 160% of RES for the most challenging hour. So we need some inertia from somewhere, and getting that from converters is essential. The code allows the individual nations to choose this, and this is now in progress, both for generators as well as for HVDC. And some support, fast support from demand response. Here we see analysis by Great Britain, which has been shared in context of the national discussions, saying we have a host of problems associated with extreme high penetration. These are shown against the top line here of different challenges. And one of them is the inertia problem and rate of change of frequency. There are a host of different solutions associated with this, but as shown across here on the far right, some of those solutions depend upon retaining synchronous generators to deliver some services. But the bottom two, if I can go back again, no, that doesn't seem to be possible. Yes, there we are. The VSM is now being selected as the solution for Great Britain and has been put forward for discussion now with the stakeholders, where from 2021, all converters will need to be voltage controlled rather than current controlled, and be effectively voltage source VSM based control facilities. This is very controversial, and ending the era of phase-locked loops is a major revolution, I would call it, rather than a small change. Here is a small element of the specification as it is at the moment. It is that all converters should behave like a balanced three-phase voltage source behind a constant impedance over the 5 Hertz to 1 kilohertz band. And this is a very major change in terms of moving forward, and is a big challenge. But we heard in the previous session, 9C, that current sourced from the PV world was deemed to be available in 2 to 5 years, and maybe we'll hear some more about that with that same speaker a little bit later. So that is where we are in debate. We have demand-side system frequency control as well, and here delivering an overall linear proportional system response from demand, which are non-exhaustive requirements, as unfortunately vested interest stopped this being mandatory for thermal demand, such as fridges and freezers, which could more or less have regulated the whole power system on their own at close to zero cost. No additional cost in terms of implementation, but vested interest, in my personal view, stopped us moving forward for this in an appropriate manner, using the press as the main element, scaring the general population from grid taking over control over your fridge and freezer, whereas in reality the control would still be primarily on temperature, and there would be no risk to the food. But this is a massive source of very simple implementation of delivering all sorts of frequency services.
I'll get a request wrap up shortly. Yeah.
Okay. So finally, the concluding remarks is that the network codes are a source of value creation. The property of TSO-NSOE has enabled to achieve a good move forward with the network codes prepared, and however there is a lot of work to be done in the final implementation phase. Thank you very much.
Just 2 questions, 2 or 3 questions, anyone? There's so much knowledge packed into 15 minutes, it's too short for that amount of knowledge which is there. So
apology for the speed.
Yeah.
Julian Langsteller from FGH in Germany. Thank you, Helge, for your presentation. I've got one question on the implementation of the European network codes. From MCE, is there some kind of information source where we can see the national implementation in the national member states?
Yes, and indeed, if you follow the one that's up on the screen now, www.nsoe.eu, and look for network code overview. From that source, you can go through to a area, active library it's called, and within the active library there is a source for each of the 34 countries in terms of their progressing. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but it is a work towards, and as more work is done, it will be enhanced. Next week, we are working on all the parameters and collecting what the position is on every one of about 60 parameters, which will then eventually be put up on that site, and such that in a single spreadsheet, you can see the position for every country, but that's not yet up.
If there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next.